So with the pending release of Warhammer Total War 3, we're coming to the end of the Warhammer trilogy and really the last chance to see any new major feature introductions to the Total War Warhammer franchise. And as such, there are a bunch of things that I've wanted to see in Total War for a very long time, and this kind of seems to be the final opportunity for that to happen. Now, some of these are pretty minor changes, particularly to the UI, but also quality of life differences that will affect your campaign. This is entirely my opinion, and I'd love to know what you guys think, if you agree with any of these ideas, or if you have a few features of your own that you'd love to see introduced to Total War. So I figured, hey, let's start a chat and see where this takes us. So without further ado, game on. A huge thing for me, and something that CA has really begun to deal with, are the diplomacy options in Total War. I understand that this is a real-time strategy game and people love the huge battles that go into each and every campaign, but for me, this is a turn-based grand strategy game. The battles are something I enjoy, but reluctantly accept they must exist in order to make the campaign that little bit more fun. I kind of feel like Total War wouldn't really stand up on either by itself, but together they do make pretty much one of the best strategy games there is. But I've always felt when playing on normal difficulty, diplomacy almost stands up. There is enough in there action-wise and different ways you can manipulate the system to better your empire. But as you get into higher and higher difficulties, that completely falls through. In fact, diplomacy typically becomes pointless by about the mid-game and is completely irrelevant by the endgame. Maybe in Warhammer, given how many factions they are, you can argue it still has its place, but by and large, diplomacy is going to be something you're trying to control to prevent it completely breaking down, rather than really using it to gain anything unless you're willing to go extremely gamey with it. Something that certainly has its place, but for me just isn't that fun. For anyone that's played a lot of grand strategy games, you'll know that Total War's diplomacy is incredibly shallow. And though I would love a complete rehaul of it, they have begun to hint towards this with all of the updates that came with Three Kingdoms, and I'm going to give them the benefit of a doubt. But where my real gripe comes in, and something that I seriously want to see improved on, is the introduction of a min-max request system. Now once more, we have kind of seen this introduced with Three Kingdoms with a make it work option, when you just want to see how much you'd have to give to actually get a diplomatic deal to go forward. But I'd also love to see it go the other way. I want to know exactly how much I can ask of someone while still getting the deal to go through. If we take this for example, we know that they're offering a non-aggression pact, and if we go to counteroffer, we do have that the likelihood of success is high. You could even add in military access and still have a high chance of success. But now if we start demanding money, all we know is it's high. We don't actually have any button that would allow us simply to max this out. So instead, we're going to have to go through and go ludicrously high, and then start halving it. We know we're now down to moderate, but we're still having to physically type this in every time. I appreciate that this is a very small thing, but this can make a huge difference to your campaign. Being able to wring that little bit extra money off the AI can be the difference between life and death in a campaign. An extra couple gold here could see you surviving without becoming bankrupt, or just help you afford to build that final level structure that you simply would not be able to without this cash injection. It's a seriously tiny detail, and I do get that they don't want to put it in because it would kind of make diplomacy easy. But at the same time, if all we're going to do is sit here and type in numbers until eventually it works, can they not just give us a button to do that for us and remove a bit of that monotony? Heck, if this was real life, I would literally be employing diplomats to do this for me. I'm not going to sit around debating how much money someone will give me. You'd have people to do that for you, rather than just sitting there typing all different amounts of gold and kind of halving and guessing roughly where it will lie. Not to mention more information on how this treaty would assist in improving relations and how that will increase or decrease over time. Now you do have some of this information come up, but you have to exit and enter a different screen in order to do it. You don't get it straight away when you're asking for the deal. It's a minor thing, but the more clicks you have to make in a UI, the worse the UI is. It's a very simple change, just introducing the same amount of information but onto a different screen. They have gotten a lot better at this. By introducing a little information here, such as likelihood of success, you're able to very quickly look through what actually even has a chance of working, as well as begin to develop your ideas on how to better use diplomacy to your advantage. But just by introducing that min-max request system, it would really open up diplomatic options to be more of a legitimate way of expanding in your campaigns. It's an incredibly simple thing, but I really do think it would have a great effect. This also links in to when the enemy is giving you options. Can we make a peace treaty? We are declaring war on you. May we have a trade agreement? Being able to see a bit more of the backlash and how this affects your interaction with other players is a massive part of the game. And again, I understand they've introduced a lot of this into Three Kingdoms, but I don't feel they've done enough. In any strategy game, the more information you have at any one time, the better your decision making. And the better your decision making, the better your overall campaign experience is going to be, as you'll be able to develop ideas to react to things as well as to control things. The more control you have, then, to steal a phrase, more likelihood you have of success. And on the note of control, some form of undo mechanic really has been needed within movement ever since the game shifted into a 3D space. Now let's just quickly go through why there isn't one and how we could actually change this to improve the situation. First off, if we click and hold and move around, we can see our percentage of movements going down. Now, if we move a tiny bit, we haven't changed the fog of war. We've lost 4% of our movement and nothing's been affected in the game. So why can't we take this back? Well, there is no reason. You just can't, because there's never been an option for it. If we dip into our next segment, not only have we moved into the new bar, but we've also changed the fog of war. Now, a very common solution to this that I've seen in plenty of strategy games is to simply not reveal the fog of war until after you accept the movement you've made. Being able to move in segments would be extremely useful. This would help prevent such minor things as clicking slightly to the side of something, or when you're trying to enter or besiege a city and you stop just short, even if the arrow is telling you that it's okay, as there always seems to be a little bit of a discrepancy between the yellow and the red when it comes to entering cities, as if the model is slightly larger than the actual place. Now, I accept with the fog of war changing as you move, it would essentially be cheating to then be able to undo your move. And if we have to have the fog of war move, well, that's fine. In this situation, it would make a pretty big difference. But when you have multiple armies around, and you've already revealed that field of view, why shouldn't we be able to move out here and then move back? Or even, as a bit of a compromise, accepting it per segment. With Total War 2, we see some great integration of stances and our movement range. Now, there have been some great additions into Total War Warhammer 2, with this bar being segmented, showing the actual percentage left, and having clear indication between your stances of how much you need in order to do them. But little things like being able to say, I want to enter encampment stance, but then still having that 50% movement to actually move them around, rather than trying to get it to 50 or as close as possible. 51 will have to do, and then setting up encampment. Only to find, lo and behold, your 51% actually isn't enough. Basically, giving some way of preventing stuff like this would be so useful. An undo option would be ideal, but once more, we've likely expanded this field of vision or we could potentially have come across units that are set in ambush. At this stage of the game, that is certainly a possibility, but there needs to be more measures to prevent you overshooting your mark. Thankfully, in this position, we'd be close enough to run back to the Crooked Fang Fort and get some help from Trillian, as these would simply not be able to reach us in the one-turn time frame. But that's then having to change your plan to react to a failure of a UI. You're not devising plans based on the best situation or even the information at hand. All the information says we should be able to do this. 51% movement range. Character does not have enough movement range to adopt this stance, but requires only 50%. We have an entire 1% more in order to do it. Whereas if we set up here, we can see very clearly that you can move and do it. So by leaving them at 55%, we have been able to enter our encampment, but while following the rules, this unit has been unable. Essentially meaning you're going to have to rethink your entire plan to ignore the UI and start moving while leaving yourself 55% each time you move in order to encamp. Well, that's 5% lost every turn. That's going to pretty quickly add up. So perhaps then a better method would be not to undo your movement, but to allow you to select your stances before you move, with the potential to deploy this stance, entering either when you max out your movement, or perhaps when you get intercepted. Basically, it's something I understand why it exists and why it kind of needs to exist, but it is still going to bug the heck out of me every time I play these games. And if you've watched any of the Total Challenge, you'll know exactly what I mean. The amount of times I've told units to either go into or besiege a settlement, or even attack someone, only to zoom in and find the tiniest slither of red that just stops you from getting in there. I'm actually getting annoyed just talking about this. Right, movement, undo, needs to be a thing. Moving on. One of the biggest things I've always wanted to see introduced to the Total War franchise is something that's actually present in most grand strategies and also a lot of strategy games today. So if we go ahead and load up a new campaign, we're presented with a bunch of different options. Now in Total War, you've pretty much always been able to separate the campaign and your battle difficulty, which is a great little addition to the series, because as we found out from the Why Play Legendary video, not many people like the nerfs and buffs that have been applied to the battles, and that's totally fair enough. So we have options here from easy to very hard, options here from easy to legendary. We can even now change our Chaos Invasion, with off-on as well as general difficulties for those invasions. Once more, a great addition, and it's always good to have different options in how you set up the difficulty of your campaign, and then further personalizing it as you wish. You also get options in the settings going into battle times, realism mode, incremental autosaves, saving to the cloud, as well as adjustments on our advisor health. But that is it. Now there are two main things I would love to see added into this settings menu. For starters, an Iron Man mode option. Now one of the reasons I tend to play on Legendary is it really does force you to deal with every situation as it arrives. That being said, if I could enter into an Iron Man mode without having to go into those higher difficulties and face what at times can be quite frankly a ridiculously overpowered AI, I really would. The game balance for Total War has always been best for me, usually around hard to very hard, depending on the faction and the mechanics they play with. The fact that Legendary forces you to deal with everything is just something I thoroughly enjoy. Coming back from the point of no return gives you a certain feeling of accomplishment that you simply can't get when you always know the option to retry is there. This doesn't just have to do with battles. Fair enough, if you lose a battle, you can always replay it, but it also has to do with the campaign itself. Moving your armies out when you know you can quickly reload before always means you can push for advantage with a really nice safety net put in place. But by introducing Iron Man mode, you have to learn to prepare for a lot more situations and be a little more defensive in your advances. Basically, it changes the entire way you play and really drills home different aspects of the game and how certain mechanics work. But the main reason is genuinely just the narrative. Completing a campaign where you've had no choice but to continually push forward gives you a really nice story to look back on, and gives you that great sense of accomplishment that I truly don't think you get from not playing with this mode. Now, if you have a ton of self-control, it's 100% doable without any game mechanic forcing you to not load a save. But I know me, and I would 100% go back and retry battles, retry entire turns to try and get a better result. Which nicely takes me to my next point of introducing a "This is Total War" button to the very beginning of your campaign. To anyone who's tried a "This is Total War" campaign, the most annoying thing is having to go back 1, 2, 3 turns just to find that one faction that you did not declare war with, for the simple reason you didn't notice you even found them. And on lower difficulties, this is 100% manageable. But getting into Legendary, it's insanely frustrating. You've put a lot of time and a lot of effort into a campaign, simply to have it fail because one unit moved a little too far, revealed another faction in your end turn, and there is nothing you can do about it. Or perhaps it was just a straight up mistake, and you forgot to check diplomacy at some point and just missed one faction as you went. A great example of this is actually if you check a channel out called This is Total War. Now, they make an amazing job of playing through This is Total War campaigns, but even when talking to them about this, it has been a massive thing that both of us wanted to introduce, so I know I'm not the only one who thinks this, where if you start in a centralized position surrounded by other factions, you're going to have to spend 5, maybe even 10 minutes just going through every faction declaring war on them, which frankly is just a massive waste of time, particularly when you really want to be focused on your campaign and not having to deal with anything on the side. It hits such a small proportion of the player base that I can understand why they haven't really prioritized such things, but I can't see it being that difficult just having a setting automatically declare war on everyone as you meet them, or heck, even if it was just everyone in the game, that would be perfectly fine. At the end of the day, you're going to be doing that anyway, and though it will drag a few more armies towards you, that's kind of the point of a This is Total War campaign, so I wouldn't really have any problem with it. Anything to make your life a little bit easier, particularly in that sort of situation, and if you could combine this with the Iron Man mode, it would make even the lowest difficulty with the easiest faction a challenge, and something that could lead to some epic discussions of that ridiculous campaign you had where, playing as the High Elves, you ended up at war and getting invaded by the Empire within the first few turns. It's stupid and it's horrible, but you know what? The best parts in Total War are when everything goes wrong and you pull yourself back from the clutches of defeat. Total War really is a game for me that has been built upon years of losing and thoroughly enjoying it. So not only will you get this amazing narrative that you can talk about for years to come, you will also introduce a lot more strength to your gameplay as you develop better control in the campaign to greater assist you as you expand into different difficulties, or even into different factions, some of which really do require you to have some pretty good knowledge of the campaign to make up for the faction's own lackluster efforts, shall we say. My final point is such a quality of life one that I do kind of feel bad for bringing it up. But you know what, this is a game and we're just about making it fun. My final point is really just to make life a lot easier for players, particularly when starting a campaign you've never done before. Now, when you come into games like Warhammer where it's fantasy, not that many people are going to know every area on the map. I've been playing Warhammer Tabletop and reading books on it for a good 20 years now. Heck, I still have an original Slayer certificate somewhere. I don't even think they do that anymore. And even I don't know where every province is. Sure, I can show you the Broken Lands. We can come down here to the Dragon Isles. But I couldn't tell you the name of the settlement. I couldn't tell you half the stuff around here. I just know it belongs to the Tomb Kings. Basically, having some clearer indication of where your objectives are is going to make a huge difference. So I love how in Total War they have this nice straight banner when there's no form of city defense, and this beautiful crenulated banner for if they have some kind of walls in the settlement. But why then, when you bring up your settlement lists, there's no clear indication that this right here, the Hell Pit, is somewhere you actually need to get in order to complete the game. If we were to take a look at Fort Stragov and the Hell Pit, they look identical. Yet in here, we can see we don't even need to claim Fort Stragov in order to claim our victory. It's not going to be a big change, even something small like making the ribbon gold or having a little icon attached to the bottom. It would just make life a lot easier when you're pushing to the end game, when you're only really looking to claim the regions you need because, well, you've conquered everything else. And once more, having to click on objectives, find the regions you need, and click on them. Sure, it's nice and it will show you what you need to do and where you need to go. But that's a series of clicks and searches that could have been so easily fixed by simply zooming out and seeing, hey, that one's gold, I need to go there. It's a tiny detail, but it would just make life a lot easier. But there you go. A few small feature changes that I really think would improve the Total War franchise and I would definitely want to see introduced before the end of the Warhammer trilogy. But what do you think? What feature changes do you want to see in Warhammer 3? What are you looking forward to? How would you improve the franchise? Leave your comments below, I'd love to check them out. And if you like this video, please hit that like button and I'll know whether or not to try a few more of these discussions in the future. Plus it really helps the channel. But either way, thanks for watching. I've been Bjorn, you've been awesome. Till next time, peace out.